to finish this lesson. Good morning, everyone. And this is our last session for the Elul challenge. And hopefully today, in the 50 minutes that we have or so, we'll finish up lesson 48 from part 2. Lesson 48 has been dealing with the idea of encouragement. The fact that when you start on the path to divine service, you're going to need lots of encouragement, and you have to find out how to encourage yourself, because it's going to seem like you're not making any progress, and yet you are, right? And we ended Monday, excuse me, by hearing Rabbi Nachman's parable about the tzaddik who felt that he was making no progress, right? Because he was having a lot of problems finding the good, and when he did find the good, right, he was so happy that he found the good, it actually allowed him to fly off and have a mystical experience. He seemed to fly off into the heavenly realms and into the universes. But then when he returned, after he recovered himself from this joyous moment, it seemed like he hadn't moved at all from the place where he was, or if he did move, it was just a hair's breadth. He couldn't perceive it. But to God, it was like he had moved through all the heavenly realms and through all the universes. And so we feel when we're on the path to divine service that we are not making progress. We always feel that there are these things that are thrown in our way and that we're never moving from where we are. But Rabbi Nachman reminds us that even if we can't perceive any movement, and even if that movement to us is so small that it's only a hair's breadth, God perceives our movement as being thousands of kilometers, if not thousands of universes in distance. And this is to help encourage us so that we don't lose sight of the fact that we are making progress. So now we're going to go on from there. We are in the middle of the second page, on the first side of that second page. Likutei Moharan, part 2, 48:1:7. Okay, so this is just after the parable about the tzaddik who was overcome with depression, okay, which I just summarized for you right now. So going on after this parable, right, Rabbi Nachman says he should greatly rejoice over this and constantly encourage himself with happiness, because depression is very, very harmful, okay? Right, and again, remember, Rabbi Nachman is saying that, happiness is the core of what we're supposed to do. It's the core of what allows us to live our Jewish life. And depression is very harmful, right? Because it's the antithesis of happiness. And he goes on to say, Vada, and know, once a person wants to enter into the service of God, his becoming depressed, God forbid, immediately becomes a great sin. This is because depression is the other side, sitra achara, right? And this is, of course, a mystical concept that you have the world of happiness, the world of service to God, but then you have the other side of it, right? You have the side that contains all the negative emotions and all the negative things as well. Yes, Marnie?
Because it's depression is supposed to be the inward part of anger.
Okay.
So anger is what you're just talking about.
Okay. So that's an interesting way. That's an interesting way of looking at depression. Yes, that it's the inward part of anger, right? And so therefore, right, it's really right. God says, God seems to feel, at least through Rabbi Nachman, right, that giving into that is considered a great sin, right? So it says this is because depression is the other side and God despises it. Now, let's be clear here. God does not despise those who are depressed. God despises the concept of depression, okay? And we also understand, right, nowadays, because remember, Rabbi Nachman is writing in the 1800s. We have a deeper understanding of mental illness, right? But what Rabbi Nachman is ultimately trying to say through this, right, is that depression is something that robs the world of our happiness and the products of it, right? He goes in a note later in other lessons to say that why does God hate depression? Because it robs the world of brachot. It robs the world of blessing. It makes us very restricted, right? and it doesn't allow us to be the broad people we're supposed to be. And so I just want to make it very clear. God does not hate those who are depressed, right? Obviously not. That's not what he's saying, right? But God hates depression and what depression does in the world. And so as a result, you have to work very hard not to succumb to it. Yes.
It seems that, like, just at first thoughts and first reflections on the nature of depression, that depression is the antithesis of gratitude. And if you are depressed and you can't see the blessings of your world, like you said, robs you of the blessings,
right,
then you can't be grateful for what you do have in your existence.
Right.
And hence all of the methods that Rabbi Nachman of Breslov has been teaching us about finding the joy, like those are ways to undercut and undermine depression, really. And
right,
it's really about gratefulness that becomes the antithesis of depression, in some way. I mean, I'm sure there's more to it, and there might be exceptions, but
right. But it's the whole idea that I do have to make very clear. He's not saying that God hates those who are depressed.
no, I get that.
No, because that it's a very thin line, right? It's the idea that in his philosophy, depression, as you said, right, it robs people of gratitude. It robs people of being able to actually, be a blessing in the world, right, and to interact with the blessings of the world. And that's why God despises it, because each one of us is capable of bringing so much blessing into the world. Right. And again, always remember that when you hear Rabbi Nachman say things like this, he's struggling with some type of mental illness as he's saying it. Right. So he's applying this in some ways to himself, that when he's in a state of depression, he feels and understands as if God despises the depression. Right. And then, of course, then that can lead you, and this is my own extrapolation, that could then lead you into the falsehood that God despises you because you're depressed. Right. That's wrong. God doesn't despise you, but God despises the depression that is not allowing you, as Ari so wonderfully expanded upon Rabbi Nachman's one thing, right, to be able to be a blessing to the world and to experience gratitude and joy and all this stuff, right? And this all comes from the other side, sitra achara, right? The side where all the negative emotions and negative things come from. Right. And of course, what we have to try to do is to live more in the side of positivity. Right. And ultimately, I would say to find the balance between the two sides. Right. Because we're not saying you should never experience these things, but you have to always point yourself toward the good and the positive, and then try to find that place of balance. Right. Between the two. Going on. Now we're on the second part of the chapter. And a person has to be extremely stubborn in the service of God, not to desert his place. In other words, the little bit of service he has begun, no matter what comes his way. Remember this well, because you will have much need of it when you begin even a bit of the service of God. Okay? So we have, right, this whole idea that you've got to be stubborn, right? You have to be stubborn, and you have to make sure that no matter what, even if it's just a little tiny bit, you can't give it up, okay? A person needs tremendous determination to be strong and courageous. Notice the words that are going through. He always says the idea strong and courageous, which is the translation of chazak ve'amitz, or ve'ematz. And we've been hearing this every day in the month of Elul at the end of Psalm 27, as was pointed out to me on Monday, right? And it's this idea that what Moses said to Joshua, right? Chazak ve'amatz, right? Or in this case, ve'amitz, right? This is what Rabbi Nachman is saying to us, right? Right? Moses is always saying to Joshua, be strong and courageous, be strong and stout-hearted, right? And this theme runs through this lesson. He's always saying this. This is how you are stubborn, right? You're stubborn by, even though he doesn't directly say it, by by following Joshua's example, because these are words that represents Joshua, right? Joshua was chazak ve'ematz, right? He was strong and courageous. Moses told him to be that, and that's what he was. And it was that aspect of Joshua that helped him conquer the hostile promised land. Because the conquest of Canaan was not easy. It was a hostile land, right? But he was able to do it because he was chazak ve'amitz, chazak ve'ematz. How do we achieve conquering our own Canaan, right? Which is kind of the metaphor you can see here. We have to model Joshua's courageousness and his stubbornness. So it's interesting, and that's something that, again, we've been hearing this. That's how you make tshuva. That's how you do all things, right? And again, you're always going to hear this throughout this lesson, right? Different variations of this. So you're to be strong and courageous, to hold on and maintain your position, even if they cause him to fall time and again, God forbid. For there are times when they cause a person to fall from the service of God, as is known. Nevertheless, it is incumbent upon him to do whatever he can in the service of God, and not to allow himself to fall entirely, God forbid. This is because one must surely experience all these falls, descents, confusions, and so on before entering the gates of holiness. And the true tzaddikim underwent all of this, right? Why do you have to be stubborn? Because you're going to fall. You're going to go up and down. You're not going to stay on the same place. You're going to have good days and bad days. You're going to have days when your spiritual practice feels like you can do it. You're going to have days when you don't do it. You're going to have days when you're sitting in the prayer service and it just doesn't feel like you know what's going on, or you just aren't getting it or connecting that day. You're going to have days when you want to go out and give tzedakah to every charity and volunteer for every single thing. And you're going to have days when you want to do it, but you're not going to be able to do it. And you can't let your falls stop you. You got to be courageous. You've got to be stubborn, right? And you're going to go up and down and up and down and up and down. But even when you're going down, don't sweat it, right? Don't sweat it. It's okay. Use that to help you start back up again. And know that you're just like the great tzaddikim of our tradition. That you're not, the tzaddikim didn't have an easy run of it. They didn't just say, I'm going to go out and, change the world and do it. And it was all lollipops and roses for them, right? You're no different from the tzaddikim, okay? And just as you go up and down, that's what the Baal Shem Tov did. And that's what Moses did. Moses had his good days and his bad days. And that's what all of the great tzaddikim, Abraham, right? The matriarchs, the patriarchs, but they persevered, okay? And I like this idea of him that we are no different than the tzaddikim, because there's a tzaddik in each one of us waiting to blossom, right? And we just have to remember that they went up and down, we can go up and down. So we have to in some ways give ourselves permission to allow ourselves to go up and down and realize that that's okay, right? As long as we're stubborn about it and we don't allow those times when we're on the downward part of the slide to drive us into sitra achara, the other side, and depression, right? Okay, I didn't really feel it today. Why, right? And that's a good topic then for your hitbodedut that evening with God, right? Why didn't I feel it today? Instead of giving into depression, well, why was today a downward slide, right? And then hopefully you work that out and are able to go up again, okay?
Everything in the world is difficult.
Right. Well, yeah, everything in the world is difficult. You're right. Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what he's seeing is that too many people are allowing the difficult things in the world to rob them of their ability to serve God, even just a little tiny bit. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. No, go on.
So that's my failures.
Right.
People how to step up next. And the next time
Right. But the thing is, it's one thing to say that and understand it academically. It's another thing to live it. Right? Because that's the whole thing. We say a lot of things, but are we actually believing it that we're living it, or are we just saying it and we understand it academically? Right? Because it's one thing for me to say, especially if I'm on the upward part of the slide, oh, yes, we have to learn from our mistakes. But then when I make a mistake, right? Oi, right? So do I actually then practice what I preach, right? Do we understand beyond just academically that what you said is okay? That yes, you do actually learn from your mistakes. And so instead of giving up and feeling like this is a catastrophe, that you have to still continue to serve God with that little bit of joy you have left and rebuild, right? Because what he's saying is the tzaddikim did that. They went up and they went down, but hopefully they caught themselves before they went even beyond where they were before. But even if they did, they went up, they went down, and they went back up again. And they kept doing that, and it wasn't a smooth trajectory from normal Jew to tzaddik. It was, and finally they hit their, their tzaddikness. Yes.
I think for me, the thing that's about is what does exactly mean service to God?
Service to God, I think, can mean anything. I mean, officially it means prayer and it means following the mitzvot, right? Service to, I mean, in the broadest sense, right?
Yeah.
Service to God is engaging with the mitzvot and living a life centered on mitzvot in community, right? So that could be prayer, that could be tzedakah, that could be, family life, right? It's engaging and living a life based on mitzvot, engaging with the covenant.
So basically, falling in this case means really not feeling attached to faith or to the mitzvot or to the requirement of doing that.
Right.
Days, and then you just persist and you're stubborn through that.
Right.
Despite the fact that you are disaffected, perhaps.
Yes.
And that it is getting through those trenches. And
yeah, because that's what it is, right? For him, right? Service to God is you're connecting with the covenant, right? So right, and right, and so there are days when you're just completely disconnected and disaffected by, right, the mitzvot. They're not, you're not feeling it when you light your Shabbat candles. You're not feeling it when you pray. You're not going out and pursuing justice in the world, or really you are, but it's not really moving you. You're not doing it to the best you can, right? You're feeling distant from God, from the community, from what it means to be Jewish. And for him, what does it mean to be Jewish? The covenant.
yeah.
Right? The covenant is where it's at. So that's what you've got to engage with. And that's what should be giving you joy. Right? And when it doesn't, then you got a chazak ve'ematz, and you have to persevere through it, right? And figure out how to regain that joy. Yeah, no.
If you fail, and not so much with God, but just in every day, it's so hard now because of social media. Even something you did 20 years ago, you said something, because it was that time. You can't even really rise back up again because people are always going to pushing you down or taking things out of context.
Well, right. So in other words, we have to figure out what chazak ve'ematz means in that context, right? So that's, again, so it's not that we have to, right? Well, what does that mean? That means when something comes up from the past, like I can just think to myself that I have to be honest with myself and not try to spin it, right? Yeah, this is how I felt 20 years ago, but I'm on a path, right? And you have to acknowledge that.
No, you said it, that you haven't changed. Okay.
Right. Well, you have to understand, Rabbi Nachman isn't suggesting that any of his followers go into politics, right? But I mean, but I do take your point. And I think part of, for us, what chazak ve'amitz and all that means is that, yeah, when something gets dug up, remember that you're no longer defined by that, or hopefully you shouldn't be. And even if others are going to say you still are, you have to constantly remind them. You have to be stubborn about it. I know what you dug up. I know what you believe I said. You also have to understand that I've changed and I'm on, right? And you have to, right? So you have to, that's part of the stubbornness, right? Sure, fine, bring it up. Oh, we're going to talk about this again? Sure, let's talk about this again. Yes, when I was that age, this is what I felt, and I won't deny, right? What I think is disingenuous is when people try to spin it and be all like, oh, well, that's not really how I felt. Own it, admit it. Yes, this was how I felt at that time. Now I've changed. Now let me take you through my process and my progress, and let me show you how I went up and down and up and down. I mean,
It's
you know,
very funny. I had a memory yesterday of a situation where I took my mom to a doctor, and I was sitting waiting in the waiting room, and there were other people there, and they said, "Oh, that was Elsie Besser. Her daughter was a blah 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 blah." I said, "And I'm the daughter, and I'm not that man."
there you go.
Which was exactly.
Right, right. No, but I think that's part of it, right? It's also this idea of honesty, emet, right? Emet, right? That was my emet. That was my truth back then, right? I mean, again, because I'm sure if people dig hard enough, right? This is what, in some ways, what Rabbi Nachman is saying, right? If people dig hard enough, you can find the bad in everything. And you can dig hard enough and find the bad, and then the person has to be, but no, okay, fine, but let's dig a little bit deeper and find the current good, right?
This is a very pertinent, example, because on two levels, I think that Rabbi Nachman was kind of canceled to a certain extent, and he was stigmatized by the community for certain writings that he had at the time.
Oh, very much so. He's
And so
he's a very divisive figure.
So what he was talking about at the time was this forgiveness aspect. And why that's relevant to today is because Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, he was commenting about how there were two in World War II, there was an anthropologist that had to study the Japanese culture, and she noted that it was an honor society, and that differs from a forgiveness society. In an honor society, there is no forgiveness. You have your honor, and it's either means to have integrity or it doesn't. And so what he was concerned about was how the West, which was normally a forgiveness society, which is based on Torah and everything about forgiveness and renewal, was becoming an honor society. So here you have this situation where people are digging up from 20 years ago where you have dishonored yourself and now you're getting canceled. And you see this situation as a current affair right now. So I think
what we lack is when those things happen, we have to listen to the people and take them seriously when they talk about their journey from where they were then to where they are today. We have to assess the journey, not one moment in time.
Celebrate the renewal.
Right, and celebrate the renewal if they have shown that tshuva has happened, right? Because we have to believe in tshuva. We're going to be experiencing it at the end of the week, right? So we have to believe in it. So if we believe in it, then, okay, so sure, this person was at point A, God knows how many years ago, and said something, vile, right? What are they doing today? And can they show us the path of tshuva, right? If they can't, well, then that's another problem, right? If they can't articulate how they got from point A to point B, and they can't show us the positive things they've done between point A and point B that allowed them to get to point B, that then becomes a problem, right? Then you might have to question it, right? But this idea of when someone seems to have moved, we should hear them out. We should hear their story, and we should see what their journey has been, right? And if it's a journey that resonates for us as a journey of tshuva and growth, we should accept that, right? Yes.
This to me almost sounds like when the councils are deciding whether a person should be given probation.
Right.
When they're in jail, have they moved from that point where they were?
That's right. That's right.
Have changed enough.
Right. Have they changed enough? Right. Right. But this requires a little bit of subtlety of thought to be able to try to discern that in our fellow human beings, right? But we should at least hear them out and hear their journey, right? And on the same level, people should be open to telling their journey of how they got from point A to point B. The tzaddikim did, right? If you look at it from a Jewish perspective, tzaddikim told us all the stuff that they did to get from point A to point B to point C to point D, and we have to do the same, and we have to be able to, because remember, Judaism says you're not trapped in what you did 20 years ago, right? You're not. if you've truly repented and you've truly moved on and you've truly changed, right? Our job is trying to figure out, are we just being fed another load of, oh, I've changed, right? Or has the process of tshuva actually happened for this person? That's the tricky part.
But it's also, and not to forget,
Yeah.
like, it's also finding the good in
Yes.
who you were 20 years ago as well. Like, I think that's also part of the thing, is that, and even before that, yeah, you might have messed up years ago, but there were still, even then, there were still parts of you that were good that deserves to be preserved to who you are today.
Yes.
And, so there's still that element of
protecting
that which was positive and shaking off that which was
negative, right?
That needed remedy.
That's right. That's right. Again, Rabbi Nachman is saying that we engage the world and people, I think, in a little bit more authentic way than we do. Yes, I know.
Could you say the greater the struggle
Mm-hmm.
is, Josh, the greater potential for the reward, the more understanding of where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think I would say Rabbi Nachman would say that given everything I understand from his writing is that, I don't know if it's the greater the struggle, but no matter how great the struggle, keep going, right? Keep going. You're going to get the reward, right? I don't know if he would exactly say it's commensurate, but he might. I mean, yeah.
The struggle maybe.
Yeah.
You understand the reward or the potential for.
I think in that way that the struggle and allows you to be able to see the potential, right? And to see and understand. If you struggle just a little, you'll understand your reward to the level at which you struggled. I don't know if he would actually say the greater, but you would.
Yeah, or reward. I don't know.
Yeah, you will have deeper understanding if you can persevere through your struggles. The greater struggles will give you deeper understanding of yourself. I do believe that is sort of what he is trying to say, right? And that's why the higher you get, the more hard the struggles seem, right?
What you think?
I think personally, yes, that the more you struggle, the better you will. So the deeper you can understand the reward. I don't know if the reward changes, but you understand the depth of it as you struggle. I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Okay, going on. And no, right? An individual can already be at the entrance to holiness, yet turn back on account of the aforementioned confusions, right? And it doesn't matter how far you get. You could be right at the cusp of entering Gan Eden, right? And all of a sudden you'll have these confusions and you'll fall back, right? It doesn't matter where you are on the journey, right? Alternatively, when he gets close to the entrance, then the other side or the Satan, right? And does he actually call it a Satan this time? No, he said the same thing, right? They translate it as Satan, but he says Haba al Davar, right? So, the other side or the master of things, the master of words, overwhelms him with very, very great and awesome power. May the merciful one spare us and does not allow him through the entrance. On account of this, he turns back, God forbid. For such is the way of the other side or the Satan, the Baal Davar. When it sees that a person is close, really close to the gates of holiness and is about to enter, then it mounts a very, very powerful assault against him. May the merciful one spare us. Accordingly, one needs great encouragement to counter it, right? So again, it doesn't matter where you are. You're never going to be free of it. You could be right on the portal to Gan Eden, right there, right? Just an inch away from stepping into paradise. And all of a sudden, you'll have all these doubts and all these confusions and all these things will attack you. And there's the potential for you to fall. You're never going to be free of it, right? It's something that's going to be with you always, right? And that's why you always have to have very great encouragement to counter it, right? And this is the part I love, right? And so we heard from a true tzaddik who said, had anyone, no matter whom, told me when I first began serving God, brother, be strong and hold on, right? Chazak ve'ematz, right? I would have run and been very quick in serving God. For that tzaddik too experienced all the aforementioned, yet did not hear any encouragement from anybody. Okay? We are also to blame because we don't encourage our brothers and sisters. When someone starts serving even a little tiny bit, we don't say to them, Chazak ve'ematz. Hold on, right? And here's a tzaddik who said, if anyone would have told me that, anyone, right? I had to do it all myself. I had to keep encouraging myself. But if anyone would have told me that, I would have just run toward the service of God. But no one gave me a word of encouragement ever, right? So, and again, I think that's very powerful. Yes, it has to come from inside us. We can't wait for God to do it, right? We have to encourage it, but we also have to encourage people that are on the derech. When we see someone that's trying, when we see someone that's making even the smallest little move towards something positive in the service of God, we have to go to them and say, Chazak ve'ematz, hold on. Don't let it, you're going to have days of discouragement, but don't worry. Hold on. I'm with you, right? I'm with you, brother. I'm with you, sister. We're here, right? And again, and so even in the 1800s, right? What is the tzaddik saying, right? Because we don't know who the tzaddik was that Rabbi Nachman is talking about, but sometime even in the 1800s, right? He said, he was making then, and no one in his community said anything to him, right? Or encouraged him in any way positively. He heard nothing from no one, right? So, lest we think that the Jewish community's gotten worse over time, here we have something, right? Even back then, right? No one was encouraging him. Okay? So it's a two-way street. We have to have the inner fire, but every so often we got to hear that other people are in it with us, right? And people have to come up to us and say, be strong, carry on. I know it's tough. Don't worry. We got your back, right? Going on. Therefore, whoever wants to enter into the service of God will remember this well. Give yourself much encouragement and do what you can in serving God. Then, with the accruement of the days and years, with God's help, you will surely enter into the gates of holiness. For God is full of compassion and wants your service very much. Right? We know that it feels like God doesn't want our service, or else supposedly we would be better at it or whatever, but no, it doesn't matter. Whatever you can do, right? No matter what it is, God wants it and desires it very, very much, right? And know each time you detach and shift from just a bit from materialism to his service, all the movements and changes accumulate, combine and bind together, and come to your aid at a time of need. In other words, when there is, God forbid, any trouble of misfortune, right? And it's a cumulative process. Each little hand breath and hair breath is accumulative, right? And so you do the little hair's breath, and that's fine. You do another, and you do another, and you do another. It doesn't matter. We're not asking you to leap the chasm, right? But it's all going to come together. It's all going to be cumulative, and it's all going to help you in your continuing service with God. And then this is the very famous verse, which we all translate wrong and which we sing wrong. V'da, and this is what he says in Hebrew. Sheha'adam tzarich la'avor al gesher tzar me'od me'od. Right? Right, but right, that's the song, right? Yeah. But we don't sing it the way he wrote it in Hebrew. This is his quote, right? The quote is, Sheha'adam tzarich la'avor al gesher tzar me'od me'od, v'haklal v'ha'ikar shelo yitpachei klal. Right, now think about we sing, Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tzar me'od, v'ha'ikar lo lefaked klal. He is saying, and when a person, right, needs to cross an extremely narrow bridge, the essence of the matter, right, v'haklal v'ha'ikar, shelo yipaked klal, do not be frightened at all. And even that is not the right translation in my viewpoint, because what binyan is yitpaked? We have any Hebrew mavens here? What binyan is that verb? Yitpaked.
Oh, will be.
No, but not the tense, the binyan, right? It's but no, but it's in hitpalel, right? It's the reflexive binyan. It's what you do to yourself, right? Hitalech, right? To walk the dog, right? To go for a walk yourself, right? Walking yourself as opposed to walking with someone else. It's the reflexive binyan. Don't make yourself afraid. Don't frighten yourself. Not don't be afraid, but don't make yourself frightened, right? In other words, the fear is going to be there, but don't do anything to make it worse than it's already is, right? It's not telling you don't have fear. That's impossible for most people. Don't have fear, right? Come on. What he's saying is, right, don't make yourself afraid. Okay, my fear is here. Okay, but I have to make sure that I don't make myself any worse, right? So what he's saying is you ultimately are going to have to cross a narrow bridge sometime in your life. You're going to have to do it, right? And when you do it, chazak ve'emetz, be strong and courageous. Yeah.
This is really connecting with me personally. There are a bunch of things, that I'm doing right now at work, and I'm thinking to myself, how the heck am I going to do this?
Yeah.
And, I've got, certain programs that are very ambitious and certain things that need to be done very quickly because Rosh Hashanah is fast approaching. And often I will make myself frightened and say,
Right.
I can't do this. I can't do this. And then I have to tell myself just one foot in front of the other. Okay, you have to do one foot in front of the other way. And
Right.
in any event, just don't frighten yourself. Because why am I constantly, telling myself I can't? There's no point because you have to cross that bridge anyways.
Right.
And so I find that to be a very appropriate lesson for me today.
But think about the song, how we teach it and what he actually said. Right? What he actually said. I wish we could put that to actual music, right? Because that's, because the problem is that like the way we teach the song, it makes it sound like you're supposed to be able to banish your fear. And that, as I wrote in the Alberta Jewish News, for most people, that's not practical. Right? Most people, I mean, there are some people that can do it. Don't get me wrong, right? I'm not one of them, but there are some people who can just banish their fear. When I crossed the Capilano suspension bridge, I was afraid like there was no tomorrow. I don't care. I was never going to be able to banish my fear, but I tried very hard not to make myself even more afraid.
That's the difference.
Right.
You can experience fear, but
Right.
there are certain personality traits to make yourself afraid.
Right. Right.
And you have the choice. That's what he's saying.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
have the choice
Right.
of going through a fearful situation without it absolutely taking over, and so you're
Right.
immobilized.
Right. Right. And he's not saying that the whole world is a narrow bridge. He's just saying that sooner or later, you're going to have to cross your own narrow bridge. There's going to be narrow bridges in your path, right? There's nothing you can do about that. You're going to have times when you're going down, right? You're going to have to cross a narrow bridge at some time in your life. And it's going to be, gesher tsar me'od. It's not just going to be me'od. It's going to be so narrow, right? But even when you do it, you just have to make the choice. You can't frighten yourself. You got to step out onto that bridge and you got to cross it, right? So again, I love his quote. It's a shame that we didn't figure out a way to put that actual quote to music, but we kind of modified it a little bit. But you're right. It's that whole idea of our own choice. Okay. We have to try very hard not to make ourselves afraid of the things we have to confront in life. Right? We have to try that. Okay. Okay, going on. Now, this is a very bizarre parable, but it's there, right? And no, there is a tree on which leaves grow, with each leaf taking 100 years to mature. This tree, found in the orchards of the nobility, is called in their language 100 years, Mea Shanim. All right, and most likely, when it grows for 100 years, it endures what it endures. Then afterwards, at the end of the 100 years, it emits a blast similar to a cannon called an or matya, okay? Understand the parable well, okay? So what he's trying to say with this is that, right, you have this tree, and the tree grows for 100 years, and it endures all these things, and the leaves grow on it, and then right when it looks like it's going to die, it doesn't die. It emits a cannon blast and comes back to life, right? No matter how dry you think you are, no matter how distant you think you are from God, you can always rejuvenate yourself and blast that cannon, right? And come back to life, because that's what the tree does. right? It endures what it endures, and then at the end of the 100 years, instead of dying, it emits a cannon blast and goes on, right? So don't think that you are hopeless, that you're dried up, and that you're not going to have anything positive, right? That cannon blast is waiting for you. You just have to, you just have to be able to experience it.
And live to 100. Yeah.
Well, true, right, yes, and live mea shani. Yes. Okay, and now finishing up, because I do want to finish up. Now it is fitting to go with that which is taught in the lesson Azamra, right? The one about finding the good. Okay, that is to seek and search to find in oneself some merit and some good point. And with this little bit of good, with which a person finds in himself, let him rejoice and encourage himself. He should not desert his place, even if he has fallen into what he has fallen. May the merciful one spare us. Notwithstanding, he should encourage himself with the modicum of good he still finds in himself until he merits returning to God through this, and all the willful transgressions transform to merits. Remember, too, what the Baal Shem Tov, may the mention of a tzaddik bring blessing, did it see when the Satan, again, the Baal HaDavar, instigated against him, okay? There's a parable about the Baal Shem Tov. What he's talking about here is that that the Baal Shem Tov and some friends of his went on a voyage, and they got shipwrecked on an island of cannibals. And the cannibals threw them in the pot and were going to boil them to eat them. And the friend said to the Baal Shem Tov, save us, you're the Baal Shem Tov, do something, get God to notice us so that he can save us from the cannibals. And the Baal Shem Tov said, oh, I'm sorry, I've forgotten everything. I can't help you at this point. I've forgotten all my Torah learning and I don't know how to access God. And so he said to his friend, start reciting the Aleph Bet to me so that I can remember. And the person went, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Finally, by the time he got about 3/4 of the way through the Aleph Bet, the Baal Shem Tov said, oh, God, thank you. I remember it all. And he did something and they escaped from the cannibals. Okay, right? But this is the whole thing, that even when you're boiling in the pot, right, and it feels that you haven't done, you have to encourage yourself, right? The Baal Shem Tov didn't say to the friend, oh, sorry, I forgot everything. It's all up. Sorry, I know. I hope you're the third course and not the first course, right? No. What did he say to his friend? Encourage me. Recite to me the Aleph Bet, and I'll see what I can do. And then he recited the Aleph Bet, right? So because the friend encouraged him, the Baal Shem Tov was able to regain his confidence and regain his knowledge and help them, right? So that's what he's saying, right? That even when it feels like everything is going against you, encourage yourself or have someone else encourage you. Because if someone encourages you just a little bit, you might be able to get your spark back, right? And that will then help you, okay? It's a fascinating parable that I'd never heard before until I read this lesson and read Reb Nelson's notes about what the parable was, right? But it's this whole thing on the process of encouragement, right? So that even when you feel like you know nothing is encouraged. Get someone to encourage you or encourage yourself. Understand from this the extent to which you need to encourage yourself, and come what may, never give up on yourself. God forbid. Even when you're being boiled in a pot and going to be served up to a bunch of cannibals, right? Don't lose hope. Encourage yourself. And finally, and the main thing is always to be happy. A person should bring himself to joy in any way he can, even with silliness, right? Playing the fool and doing silly and comical things, or jumping and dancing in order to be happy, which is a very great thing. You should come in and look at the rabbi's office, because the rabbi's office is my living example of how I try to do this, right? Why is my office so colorful? Why do I have plushies everywhere and my little dragons from my online game and all of my Funko Pops, right? So that I can look at them and smile and laugh and giggle, right? And when the kids come in, right? And everything, and I can be silly, right? And say silly things, right? Why do I have the portrait of myself and my husband when we were in our 20s dressed like Wild West people, right? Right? Because it makes people smile when they come into my office. It makes me smile when I look at them, right? And I take this very seriously, right? That you have to bring yourself to joy in any way you can, even if it's with silliness, even if it's not being serious and doing foolish things, right? Right, that you have to do whatever you can to make yourself happy, right? And you should encourage other people to do whatever they can to make themselves happy, because that's the core of what Rabbi Nachman says. Happiness is the key. Happiness is the core. Finding the good, finding the happiness, right? And not giving in to things that rob us from our happiness, right? And dry us up. And we should do that for ourselves, and we should do that for others, right? It has to be an internal thing for us, but we can help others through our encouragement find the way to go. So that's the end of lesson 48, and we are actually 4 minutes away from service time. I do want to thank everyone for going on this journey during the month of Elul. We will be taking a break during Tishrei, and Ari and I will be talking about how to bring this up again, because I would like to continue once the high holidays are well over. And we have a chance to get through Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. But I think there's potential here to study other things, and I have some ideas, one of which I talked to you guys about. And let's see what Cheshvan brings and stuff, and how we want to modify this. Thank you. This has been absolutely wonderful. And Shana Tova to everyone. Have a wonderful start to 5784.
Thank you.